December 17, 1944.
The snow-covered roads of Belgium echoed with the growl of engines. American convoys moved nervously through the fog, their headlights dimmed, their breath visible in the freezing air. Rumors were spreading faster than orders. German soldiers dressed as Americans, stealing jeeps, changing road signs, causing chaos. At a small checkpoint near Malmedy, 2 U.S. military policemen waved down a dusty jeep carrying what looked like American GIs. Their uniforms were perfect, their accents flawless. Even their mannerisms, casual, confident, felt right. But something was off. One MP noticed how one of the soldiers saluted, sharp, too sharp, like a man trained in a different army.
Morning, boys, the MP said.
Where you coming from? The driver smiled. Bastogne, he replied, his English smooth but careful. His hand rested lightly on the steering wheel, too lightly. The MP's suspicion deepened. What's the capital of Illinois? The MP asked suddenly. The driver blinked.
Illinois.
He hesitated for half a second. Chicago. The MP's face hardened. His rifle lowered slightly, finger on the trigger.
Step out of the vehicle.
That's when they knew the question had exposed them. The jeep's crew froze, realizing their perfect disguise had failed over a single word. And just like that, one of the strangest, most dangerous operations of World War II was uncovered, where Germans disguised as Americans nearly turned the entire front line into chaos. The deception had a name: Operation Greif. A desperate, audacious plan born from Hitler's belief that chaos could win him the war he was already losing. By late 1944, the Third Reich was crumbling. The Allies had landed in Normandy, the Soviets were closing in from the east, and fuel shortages strangled the German war machine. But Hitler refused to surrender. Instead, he ordered a winter counterattack in the Ardennes, what the world would come to know as the Battle of the Bulge. To make it work, he needed confusion. And for that, he turned to his favorite commando, Otto Skorzeny, the man who had once rescued Mussolini from captivity in a daring glider raid. Now, Hitler wanted him to do something even bolder: sow panic behind American lines. Skorzeny's mission was simple, but nearly impossible. His men would steal American uniforms, capture Allied vehicles, and infiltrate enemy territory. Once inside, they would change road signs, misdirect convoys, cut communications, and sabotage key bridges. The idea was to make every American soldier doubt every other one, to turn trust itself into a weapon. To pull it off, Skorzeny assembled 150 of Germany's best English-speaking soldiers. Many were former students, sailors, or factory workers who had lived in the United States or Britain before the war. They practiced American slang, memorized baseball teams, and even rehearsed how to chew gum like GIs. But despite the ambition, there was one fatal flaw: they had almost no American equipment, and far too few fluent speakers. Still, Hitler demanded the operation go forward. The clock was ticking, and the Ardennes offensive was about to begin. Before dawn on December 16, 1944, the forested hills of the Ardennes came alive with the thunder of German artillery. Thousands of guns opened fire in a single earth-shaking barrage. Trees snapped in half, tanks lurched forward through fog, and from the chaos rolled a few inconspicuous American jeeps, except they weren't American at all. Inside those jeeps sat German soldiers wearing U.S. uniforms. They spoke English with careful accents, smoked Lucky Strikes, and joked about the Yanks pushing through. These were Skorzeny's men, the infiltrators of Operation Greif, now moving into the heart of the American front. Their mission was both simple and suicidal: get behind enemy lines, blend in, and create maximum confusion. Some carried false orders to misdirect Allied units. Others were told to seize bridges or switch road signs to send U.S. reinforcements the wrong way. A few had even memorized the names of American officers and radio call signs. At first, it worked. A disguised jeep would wave at a passing convoy, claim to be from the 2nd Armored Division, and point them down a wrong road. Within hours, reports flooded headquarters: convoys lost, bridges missing guards, fuel depots attacked by friendly vehicles. The deception was spreading like wildfire. But the real chaos wasn't in the front lines, it was in the minds of the Americans themselves. No one could be trusted. Military police began pulling over every vehicle, grilling drivers about baseball, movie stars, and state capitals, anything to expose a fake accent or hesitation. And somewhere out there in the thick fog and endless forests of Belgium, Skorzeny's disguised commandos kept moving, each knowing that if caught, they'd be executed as spies. The greatest infiltration of World War II was officially underway. December 17, 1944, a frozen Belgian morning. A lone jeep rumbled toward a checkpoint near the village of WWII. 3 men sat inside, their breath fogging the air, their uniforms dusted with frost. They looked American, olive drab jackets, US patches, even mud-caked boots. But something felt off. Sergeant William Creel, the military policeman on duty, had heard the rumors: Germans dressed as Americans, sneaking through checkpoints, turning road signs, sending units the wrong way. He stepped forward, hand raised. The jeep slowed to a halt. "Password?" Creel asked. The driver hesitated, just for a second, then said something that didn't sound quite right. The rhythm was off.
The accent tout précise.
Creel frowned. He asked again. Still, the answers came clipped, cautious. Then his eyes caught something small but deadly wrong. A Sten gun, the kind the British used, slung in the back seat. No American patrol would ever carry one. He ordered the men out at gunpoint. Within minutes, they were under arrest. Underneath their American uniforms was the unmistakable gray of the Wehrmacht. German infiltrators.
Word spread like wildfire.
The rumors weren't rumors anymore, they were real. Suddenly, every soldier looked suspicious.
Every accent sounded foreign.
Every misplaced word felt like a trap. So the MPs improvised. They started asking questions. Questions no German could fake. Who won the World Series in 1940?
What is the capital of Illinois? Où est Mickey Mouse's girlfriend?
It sounded ridiculous, but it worked. The baseball, the slang, the pop culture. Those were things only real Americans knew by heart. And thus began one of the strangest security measures in military history. The baseball test, where a love for the Yankees or a slip about Minnie Mouse could mean the difference between life and death. By December 18th, the baseball questions had turned from checkpoint jokes into military doctrine. Every crossroads, every bridge, every roadblock across Belgium and Luxembourg had one thing in common: a nervous MP clutching a clipboard and a carbine, asking trivia questions like they were passwords to the gates of heaven. The news of infiltrators, real infiltrators, raced faster than the tanks. Soldiers began to see ghosts in every shadow. A sergeant who spoke with a Brooklyn accent was detained because another soldier thought it sounded too good. A captain was arrested because his uniform looked too new. Even the great General Omar Bradley was held at gunpoint after correctly naming Springfield as the capital of Illinois. The MP thought it was Chicago. Tension turned lethal.
Friendship craquait d'ardeur suspicion.
American convoys crawled along icy roads, delayed for hours as MPs interrogated every face that passed. Drivers sweated under the spotlight, trying to remember who played shortstop for the Yankees or where the Cubs stadium stood. Soldiers began carrying newspapers, movie magazines, even baseball cards, anything to prove they were truly American. But paranoia had no logic. It didn't care about rank, uniform, or birthplace. The question was no longer who's the enemy, but who can I trust?
Behind the lines, chaos roulé. Supply truck piled up for miles.
Orders were delayed. Reinforcements arrived too late. The Germans had failed to capture bridges, but they had succeeded in capturing something far more dangerous: the American imagination. For the first time in the war, American soldiers weren't just fighting Germans in front of them. They were fighting the fear that Germans might already be among them. Autumn, 1944. The Reich was collapsing, cities reduced to rubble, armies shattered, morale gone. Yet inside the wolf's lair, Adolf Hitler still dreamed of one last strike that could turn the tide. He called it Wacht am Rhein, the Ardennes counteroffensive. But hidden beneath that grand title was a secret subplan so bizarre it bordered on fantasy: Operation Greif. Its architect? Otto Skorzeny, Hitler's favorite commando, the same man who had rescued Mussolini from a mountain prison just a year earlier. The Führer summoned him with a new task. I want you to cause panic behind enemy lines. Use their uniforms, their vehicles, their language. Confuse them. Make them shoot at shadows. Skorzeny's reaction was immediate and honest. Mein Führer, that's impossible. But Hitler was not asking. Within days, Skorzeny was ordered to form a special brigade, Panzer Brigade 150, composed of men fluent in English and trained to impersonate American soldiers. They were to steal US jeeps, uniforms, and weapons, then infiltrate Allied lines to redirect traffic, sabotage bridges, and spread chaos. The problem? Germany didn't have nearly enough English speakers. Out of over 2,500 volunteers, only 10 could speak English fluently. The rest learned phrases from pocket dictionaries, soldiers repeating "which way to Malmedy" and "Hey Joe" in thick Bavarian accents. Skorzeny improvised. His men would paint captured German Panthers to look like American M10 tank destroyers. Others would memorize American slang and baseball teams between air raids. It was absurd. It was desperate. But it was also genius, because it didn't need to work perfectly. It just needed to make the Allies believe it could. By the first week of December, Skorzeny's disguised units were ready. In a forest of fog and frost, the greatest masquerade of World War II was about to begin. December 16, 1944. The stillness of the Ardennes shattered under the roar of 1,600 German artillery guns. The Battle of the Bulge had begun. But while panzers advanced through fog and snow, another war was being fought, one not with tanks or shells, but with voices, faces, and false flags. At dawn, Otto Skorzeny's disguised troops rolled out in stolen American jeeps, wearing US uniforms, helmets, and dog tags. Their mission: sow confusion deep inside the Allied rear. They were to change road signs, misdirect convoys, cut telephone lines, and spread false rumors, convincing the Americans that German forces had already broken through their lines. One disguised group, posing as US military police, waved real American convoys down the wrong roads. Another team redirected Sherman tanks toward non-existent supply depots. A few even infiltrated fuel dumps, leaving explosives hidden under tarps. The trick worked too well. Allied communications fell into chaos. Units reported enemy tanks where none existed. Convoys vanished into the wrong valleys. Soldiers began doubting every order, every road sign, even every accent. And as the story spread, fear turned into hysteria. Rumors swept through the ranks. German saboteurs dressed as GIs are everywhere. They're changing road signs. They've captured Eisenhower himself. American checkpoints became scenes of suspicion. Soldiers questioned everyone, even their own officers, demanding to know who won the World Series, the capital of Illinois, or the rules of baseball. One wrong answer could mean a bullet. Meanwhile, Skorzeny's men, though few in number, achieved what Hitler had hoped for. They paralyzed the enemy's confidence. The Allies didn't know who to trust. Operation Greif was small in scale, but its psychological impact was immense. And as the snow thickened, the line between friend and foe blurred completely. As Operation Greif unfolded, the Germans didn't need overwhelming numbers, they just needed rumors. By December 18, 1944, whispers were racing through Allied lines. German agents are behind us. They're dressed as MPs. They're going for Eisenhower. It started with a handful of captured commandos. Under interrogation, some claimed, truthfully or not, that their mission included assassinating General Eisenhower. That one sentence sent shockwaves through SHAF, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, in Versailles. Suddenly, the Allied command structure entered lockdown. Checkpoints were established around Paris. Roadblocks sprang up across the region. Military police checked every car, every pass, every face. And at the center of it all, General Dwight D. Eisenhower was placed under armed guard inside his own headquarters. The supreme commander of Allied forces was, for a week, effectively a prisoner of his own army. Visitors to SHAF had to pass multiple security screens. Officers were detained for mispronouncing American slang. Even top generals, Omar Bradley, Courtney Hodges, and George Patton, were stopped at checkpoints by nervous sentries demanding to know baseball trivia before allowing them through. Eisenhower later recalled that the tension was unlike anything he'd seen during the war. He admitted that Skorzeny's deception, though limited in manpower, had shaken confidence at every level. For Hitler, it was proof that psychological warfare could strike deeper than any artillery barrage. A handful of German soldiers, maybe 40 in total, had turned the entire Allied rear into a zone of paranoia and suspicion. In the end, not a single bullet was fired at Eisenhower. But for days, fear ruled the roads of France. Every man was a suspect.
Every jeep a possible trappe.
Operation Greif had achieved its goal, not through destruction, but through doubt. By the third day of the Ardennes offensive, Otto Skorzeny's brilliant illusion had begun to tear at its seams. Many of his men were engineers, drivers, or radio operators, not seasoned spies. Their English was passable at best, and their American slang came from captured comic books and magazines, not real conversation. At first, they passed through Allied lines with ease, adjusting road signs, spreading false orders, and redirecting convoys into chaos. But soon, sharp-eyed American MPs began to notice small cracks in the disguise. A sergeant pronounced baseball as baseball. Another asked directions to the next petrol station. And one supposed GI referred to his pistol magazine instead of clip. Each slip raised suspicion. By December 20th, dozens of disguised Germans had been captured, some within sight of the Meuse River. Under interrogation, they confessed bits and pieces of their mission. But in classic intelligence fashion, many gave false statements, claiming they were part of a massive plot to kill Eisenhower or blow up key bridges deep inside France. The Americans believed them. Eisenhower's lockdown intensified, and Allied soldiers began shooting first and questioning later. For Skorzeny, these false confessions were both a triumph and a disaster. His tiny operation, fewer than 150 men in enemy uniform, had sparked the largest internal security panic of the Western Front. But the captures also exposed his secret unit. The Allies quickly realized that any jeep, MP, or roadblock could now be an enemy trap. From that moment on, every suspicious vehicle was stopped and searched. Every soldier was questioned about his hometown, his favorite baseball team, or who won the last World Series. What had begun as an operation of stealth and surprise had turned into a manhunt, with Skorzeny's commandos trapped behind enemy lines, their disguises no longer protection, but death sentences under the rules of war. And yet, for a few crucial days, their illusion had worked, freezing Allied movements, slowing reinforcements, and turning confusion into a weapon. By Christmas 1944, the masquerade was over. The Allies had uncovered Skorzeny's ruse, and they were furious. American soldiers, already shaken by the chaos in the Ardennes, now faced an invisible enemy who looked exactly like them. The fear was contagious. Any GI could be a German in disguise. Any jeep could carry saboteurs. When the first captured Americans were revealed to be Waffen-SS commandos, rage replaced confusion. Many frontline units no longer took chances. If a man's answer sounded wrong, if his accent was off, or if he hesitated when naming the capital of Illinois, he might not live long enough to explain. The Geneva Convention was clear. Wearing an enemy uniform behind their lines was a war crime punishable by death. Several of Skorzeny's men were tried by military tribunal within days. The verdicts came swiftly. Firing squads were assembled in frozen fields, and the condemned stood before them, still wearing the stolen American jackets that had sealed their fate. They faced their end calmly, some even saluting before the rifles fired. Meanwhile, Skorzeny himself remained hidden near the front, constantly moving between units, his name whispered like a ghost story among Allied troops. Posters read, "Beware of Skorzeny, he may be anywhere." Ironically, the panic he caused far outweighed the actual damage his commandos had done. They hadn't blown up bridges or assassinated generals, but they had paralyzed Allied logistics with paranoia. For every real saboteur, dozens of innocent soldiers were detained, interrogated, or even shot by their own side. Roads jammed with checkpoints, supply convoys crawled at half speed, and Eisenhower remained under virtual house arrest for 2 weeks. The legend of Skorzeny's commandos had grown far beyond their numbers. And though many of them died for the deception, their mission had achieved something extraordinary. They had made the entire Allied army fear its own reflection. When the guns finally fell silent in May 1945, Otto Skorzeny, Hitler's so-called most dangerous man in Europe, found himself in Allied custody. His record was infamous: the daring rescue of Mussolini, the sabotage operations behind Allied lines, and the commandos who had worn American uniforms during the Battle of the Bulge. To the victors, it seemed obvious: this was a war criminal. But the truth was about to twist in a way no one expected. At Nuremberg, Skorzeny was charged with violating the laws of war, specifically, for ordering his men to fight while disguised as Americans. The evidence was clear. He hadn't denied it. Yet, when the trial began, something extraordinary happened. Witnesses appeared, American officers, who testified that Allied special forces had done the same thing. During D-Day, during the North African campaign, and in numerous secret operations, Allied commandos had also worn enemy uniforms for infiltration or deception, provided they changed back before combat. The legal line, it seemed, was thinner than anyone had imagined. Skorzeny, calm and confident, argued that his men had only used American clothing for movement, not for direct fighting, exactly as the Allies had done. The tribunal, after weeks of testimony, agreed there wasn't enough proof to convict him of a war crime. In 1947, against all expectations, Otto Skorzeny was acquitted. The man once feared by the Allies walked free, smirking as reporters swarmed the courtroom. But freedom didn't mean peace. He was still a marked man, both hunted by the Soviets and admired by veterans across Europe. To many Germans, he remained a legend, the soldier who had defied impossible odds and outsmarted the world's strongest armies. And to the Allies, he was the reminder of a chilling truth, that even in victory, morality in war was never black and white.
Madrid, 1950.
The war was over, but Otto Skorzeny was living like it had never ended. Under Franco's protection, he reinvented himself, not as a soldier of Germany, but as a soldier of fortune. He founded an engineering firm, attended lavish parties, and moved among exiled generals, spies, and millionaires. On the surface, he was a businessman. In reality, he was building something much more elusive, a global web of influence. To the public, Skorzeny was the charismatic war hero, tall, scarred, confident, who had once defied the impossible. But behind the charm, he was quietly selling his skills to the highest bidder. He became a consultant to dictators, trainer of elite units, and broker of covert operations from Egypt to Argentina. In Cairo, he advised the Egyptian army on commando warfare, even helping to train soldiers who would later fight against Israel. In Spain, he mingled with agents from both the CIA and Mossad, playing one side against the other in the shadowy game of the Cold War. His house in Madrid became a crossroads of exiles and spies, ex-SS officers, Arab revolutionaries, South American strongmen, all drawn to the legend of the man who never failed a mission. To his admirers, he was the last knight of the old order, the daring warrior who lived by his own code. To his enemies, he was a dangerous relic, a man who refused to let go of the past. By the mid-1950s, Otto Skorzeny had turned himself into something new, a mercenary kingmaker, unbound by flags or ideologies. His battlefield was now the entire world. And for the first time, his actions were no longer just about Germany, they were about power itself. It sounded impossible, even absurd. Otto Skorzeny, Hitler's favorite commando, the man once hailed as the most dangerous man in Europe, was now working for Israel. The story began in the early 1960s. Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad, was hunting former Nazi scientists who had fled to Egypt to help develop long-range missiles for President Nasser. Those rockets threatened to put every Israeli city within reach. And some of the men behind the project had once worn the same uniform as Skorzeny. So Mossad made a decision that stunned even its own agents. Instead of killing the ex-SS commando, they would recruit him. Skorzeny knew Europe's Nazi underground better than anyone. He had the contacts, the credibility, and the access that Israeli agents desperately needed. In 1962, in a Madrid villa thick with cigar smoke and suspicion, Mossad officers met Skorzeny face to face. To everyone's shock, he agreed to help. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was ego. Maybe it was the simple thrill of another impossible mission. What followed was one of the strangest partnerships in Cold War history. Skorzeny provided Mossad with names, addresses, and supply routes of ex-Nazi scientists working in Cairo. Within months, several key figures in Egypt's missile program mysteriously disappeared, assassinated, intimidated, or persuaded to vanish. In exchange, Israel quietly removed Skorzeny from their assassination list and granted him immunity. He had become, in the most ironic twist imaginable, a Nazi saving Jews from the weapons built by his former comrades. The deal was never public. It was whispered about in intelligence circles, denied by all sides. But for Skorzeny, it was proof that he could still outwit history, even if it meant rewriting his own. By the 1970s, Otto Skorzeny had become a ghost of his own myth. The once feared commando now lived quietly under the Spanish sun, dividing his time between Madrid and his rural estate. The man who had once rescued Mussolini and terrorized Allied generals was now seen hosting garden parties, sipping wine, and charming diplomats who had no idea they were shaking hands with a former SS colonel. Yet beneath the polished smile and tailored suits, Skorzeny remained what he had always been, a soldier without a war. He advised dictators in Argentina, trained mercenaries in Ireland, and even dabbled in international arms deals. Wherever chaos brewed, his name had a way of resurfacing. But time was catching up. The swagger faded, replaced by a restlessness he couldn't shake. His comrades were dead, his Reich gone, his cause buried beneath the rubble of history.
Only the legend endure. The man Hitler trusted, the commando who tweeted army, the ghost who hoquait trop histoire Europe intouched.
In 1975, Skorzeny's final chapter closed quietly. Cancer took him in Madrid at 67. No firing squad.
No courtroom. No confession. Just silence.
He was cremated under the same Spanish sky that had sheltered him for decades. But his story, the daring rescues, the secret missions, the whispered alliances, refused to burn with him. Even today, historians debate whether Otto Skorzeny was a soldier bound by duty or a war criminal who escaped justice. Maybe he was both, a man who lived in the twilight between heroism and infamy.
Because in noir, legends never truly die.
They simply change uniforms.